On this episode of Urban U, Education Meets Justice, we explore a groundbreaking course that LaGuardia Community College offers right on Rikers Island, equipping individuals behind bars with the skills to reshape their futures. We hear from a City Tech professor as he unveils the stunning story of former Congressman George Santos. In recognition of the prestigious national accolade recently bestowed upon the Loui Armstrong House Museum, we are revisiting its newly established Partners Center, where Queen's College plays a crucial role in preserving the remarkable archive of the legendary jazz musician. That and much more. Welcome to Urban U.
When I first came to LaGuardia around 2015, I volunteered with an organization, a nonprofit called College Way. And it was a program at Rikers Island that would bring in different CUNY disciplines, different professors to teach a one-off class. The people who were organizing it were leaving the state. And they asked me and my colleague Kathy to take over. And we said, we'd love to take over, but we'd also love to make this a 3-credit college class. So that was sort of the birth of College Way as we know it today. So it took us 9 years, or, it took us a long time, but that's where we're at now.
The 3-credit first-year seminar and criminal justice course at Rikers first came into fruition in the fall of 2023, when Dr. Rowan College Way director Kathy Mora taught 19 incarcerated individuals at the George R. Vierno Center, and even participated in a graduation ceremony to celebrate their achievements. However, it's not just professors teaching this course at Rikers, but CUNY students as well, who are brought on as Justice Fellows through a 12-week paid internship called the SOAR Experiential Learning Program.
We wanted to expand in the way of teaching other students that are also interested in social justice and how it is to really acclimate and be in the space with this population, right? They want to work with this population, but they're unexperienced. So we brought this Justice Fellow idea to bring together full circle. We're teaching undergrads, we're teaching also professors as guest speakers, and we're learning ourselves. We start off with really basic training with the Justice Fellows. We start off with filling out clearance forms, and then we just meet on a weekly basis, and we talk about that fear of being in the space, specifically Rikers, and that just acclimates the whole entire room just to be united together. So I've seen our Justice Fellows just bloom. They go from, we're going into a correction facility to, I can't wait till the next time I'm in class.
And what's interesting is it doesn't just give this sort of clarity on themselves to the criminal justice majors. Other majors, like the people who design the media, the people who are in the helping professions like social work or nursing or human services who come in, they usually find like, this is what I want to do now.
I'm currently majoring in new media technology, where I'm learning different media design skills. So using those skills, I basically designed this course book that we use to facilitate all 12 weeks of our classes. What's so exciting about this model is that not only will we be able to use this in the facilitation, any student who wants to pick up this book that's incarcerated and they complete this book and they return it back to us at College Way, they will get 3 college credits from LaGuardia.
This course book has been continually used throughout the program. But for the first time since the project's inception, incarcerated women were able to participate in the course at Rose M. Singer Center this past semester.
So important to offer the women at Rikers Island the kind of tailor-made class that we're doing, where in addition to offering a class that focuses on criminal justice and procedural law, which is something that is really missing. I mean, there's not a lot of legal education considering that people are going through the justice system. You know, people assume that because you're in jail, you understand it. A lot of them do not understand it. And similarly, our course focuses on college skills like how to get into college, how do you study, what kind of things can you focus on? What is a major? And you would think that a lot of people who aren't in college have, know all about it and just said no. But a lot of these women have never been exposed to this type of curriculum, to this kind of learning opportunity where their voice is valued and it's not, and they're being included not just in the design of the curriculum, but in the implementation. So this course relies heavily on their participation too.
And considering that 70% of formerly incarcerated people end up back in the U.S. prison system within 5 years, preventative re-entry initiatives such as this credited college course are essential.
Those people are your neighbors, your brothers, your sisters, people in your community. And so I think within this culture, a lot of times the people that get locked behind walls get forgotten about. And so for us as community college students, especially at LaGuardia Community College, knowing that we're only a 15-minute drive away from Rikers Island, I think that it's an experience, especially being that they have 3 credits, they're able to jumpstart their college career if that's what they desire. And even if they don't desire that, it's just an accomplishment that they could be proud of, and I think that means more than us on the outside may know.
For Urban U, I'm Hannah Kavanaugh.
The first time I spoke to George Santos was by phone in November 2019, 3 years before his brush with infamy. It was for a routine political write-up about this little-known Republican newcomer making a long-shot bid for Congress in New York.
In his new book, The Fabulist, City Tech professor Mark Chiusauno looks into the meteoric rise and fall of former Congressman George Santos.
So the full title is The Fabulist, the lying, hustling, grifting, stealing, and very American legend of George Santos, which I thought was kind of important to explain both that he is something more than a liar, he's sort of a storyteller, he spins these tales, he's also a kind of grifter and schemer, and finally he's very sort of tied into this long American tradition of scheming and conning.
Why politics? What was the attraction for Santos?
I think that if we look back at his formative years, he was always interested in fame, he was interested in entertainment and celebrity, so I think that's a piece of it. I think he also liked the money that could be found in politics in various ways, even down to small things like using campaign money for sort of nice trips or nice meals.
Santos seemed to have come out of nowhere, and while he lost his first run for the House, he was a quick learner.
He actually sort of almost looked at what Trump was doing and tried to do the same thing himself. He would go around to different events with Trump world people and film it and sort of say what he noticed about it and what a great time he was having. So he was kind of watching very carefully. He also even sort of copied some of Trump's phrases and language and used them in his own runs. So clearly a similar kind of, he had a similar sort of chip on his shoulder as Trump did, and one that kind of, I think, propelled his run.
Even though much of his background was still unknown, 2 years later, he again became the Republican candidate.
Our defender of the American dream, George Santos, for Congress.
I'm George Santos, and I approve this message.
So the big question is, why didn't anyone ever vet him?
So on the Republican side, they had a real incentive to sort of get this guy across the finish line. First of all, it's a very tight margin in Congress. They needed his vote, and he was bringing a lot of money to the local Republican Party through the connections that he had created. So that's one thing. On the Democratic side, the candidate also did find out a lot of very sketchy stuff about him. This was in the opposition research that was available to the Democrats. The problem, again, was that it sort of didn't rise to the level that everyone was talking about it all the time, and it wasn't sort of the main thing that people were voting on. People in this race were really voting about crime and bail reform, which was a huge issue in '22.
Robert Zimmerman supports the same reckless policies that created this crime wave. New York deserves safe streets. That's why George Santos vows to tackle crime head-on in our district.
Soon after he won the election, the New York Times published an article exposing many of Santos's deceptions. Just some of Santos's lies included the schools he had attended, the places he had worked, his religion, and the source of his money.
He made it seem like he was very rich, very wealthy, and certainly did not have the kind of money that he said he did. He was often really close to the bone, had credit card debts and things like that. So he was always sort of creating a persona for himself that was not true.
What made you want to write this book?
I was interested in him as a figure, someone like this who is doing all these sort of storytelling, performances and lying. And I was interested in sort of what it was about American politics right now that allowed a guy like this to rise so quickly.
Santos was eventually forced out of Congress after being brought up on federal charges.
Santos is facing a total of 13 federal charges, including
donor fraud, unemployment fraud, and misleading the House of Representatives.
In a new development, Santos soon made a surprise announcement.
Santos announced he will challenge Lolota in the Republican primary for the 1st Congressional District on the east end of Long Island. Lolota did not seem concerned.
But a month and a half later, Santos withdrew from the race. For now.
I don't think George Santos is done. I think he has to face the music, legally speaking, and will most likely go to prison for a little while. But he himself has telegraphed that he wants to do other things after that.
If one of your writing students brought this story to you as fiction, what would your response be?
Too strange for fiction, too weird, gotta go back and edit it.
I'm Scott Kirby for Urban U.
With each election season comes a new generation of young voters, and lately young adults vote at higher rates than in recent memory. But the problems the youth face may be under the surface, and voting isn't the only method they have to advocate for themselves. That's where the Intergenerational Change Initiative comes in, and it starts with research.
It's not just doing research for research's sake, but it's to use our findings to then push change and to really make action happen. And it's also about centering the people who are most impacted by a particular issue and really empowering them to conduct the research as well.
Rachel Castillo manages programs for the Intergenerational Change Initiative, also known as ISSI, a project of the Youth Studies Department at the CUNY School of Professional Studies. ISSI enlists young people 14 to 24, including CUNY students, and empowers them as researchers and advocates.
And these are providing the data, and they're also collecting the data. So they are shaping the research methods, the tools that they want to collect, because young people know young people best. They're gonna know what's the best way to engage their peers, what tools, what methods, what questions.
ISSI started about a decade back with Sarah Zeller-Berkman, who heads the Youth Studies program at the School of Professional Studies.
We're really trying to think about how to get broad and diverse groups of young people to be able to weigh in and inform policymaking in our city about the issues that are impacting the most.
Lehman College alum Waiza Jagadar is an ISSI veteran.
I feel like with politics, we hear from the older generations, obviously, because they have the experience. But I feel like this gives a space for the younger folks to have a voice and to really speak their minds and what they think. And you'd be surprised, a lot of them are very intelligent responses.
Jessica Barreto got involved with ISSI as a high school student, and she's now a research facilitator who really engages the youth participants in the conversation.
Whether it's injustice, whether it's something unfair that happens to them. So I like to connect it with them. Like, what's one thing you can change if you wanted to? You know, everybody can think of, I can want to change this, want to change that. And just letting them know, like, you know, it's not impossible.
ISSE collects data through an annual online survey called the Youth Ask Youth Census, also known as the YAY.
And this is like a huge 80-item survey, all these issues related to community,
mental health,
learning,
social justice,
economics, mobility,
housing.
Yeah.
ISSE partners with youth organizations around the city. And through this coalition building, the real problems of NYC youth come to the surface. Afsana Rahman says these issues are personal.
Our work focuses on like a really wide range of topics. I would say that like all of them connect to me in some way or another. Like economics, a lot of us are broke out here. Housing security, I think that one currently resonates with me the most was because there were like points in my life where I, thought I would be homeless, and right now, like I'm not really in a permanent housing situation.
All this data gets parceled through in the School of Professional Studies Data Science program. ISSE then works with its partners, such as Citizens Committee for Children and YVote, within a larger NYC Youth Agenda Steering Committee. The coalition collects data together through surveys, town halls, and focus groups. Since 2022, the coalition has presented its results in an annual policy report called the NYC Youth Agenda, and with events such as Winter Data Land.
The Data Land, we make it super fun. So like it's through very interactive games that share back with about 150 other young people from 30 plus other organizations, like the data and the findings this year. And then we work very closely with a group of 40 young people from different coalition member groups to look at the data, look at other city data, and create recommendations based off of that data.
The coalition held a 2024 policy party where it presented the youth agenda to various local officials and launched a website led by YVote called a Youth Civic Hub. The hub includes a power map of power brokers, a civic glossary, a civic group directory, and a guide to register and pre-register to vote. The ISSE leaders say the agenda has already made an impact.
A lot of our work has actually inspired youth councils, creating space with an agency. The Department of Health and Mental Health are going to be launching a youth council so that young people can inform a lot of their work around the mental health initiatives that they're driving, and we know that that comes directly out of our work and our advocacy.
Other ideas that surfaced in the reports were youth housing, baby bonds, and free Metro cards for youth.
So when you look at this, you think a Wi-Fi symbol, more bars, the more connection. So we bring young people and you bring people with expertise, older people together, now you have intergenerational, and that the power is bigger. Like it's
And red is change.
Yeah. Together we make the change.
For Urban U, this is Shannon Ayala.
Still up on Urban U, we spotlight the Partner Center of the acclaimed Loui Armstrong House Museum, recently honored with a National Medal for Museums for its extraordinary community impact. Discover how Queens College is playing a vital role in preserving the dazzling archive of the legendary jazz musician. But first, New York City history unveiled with a CUNY alum. Stay tuned.
So we're going to head to our first stop, which is going to focus on some of the abolitionist goings-on in this area in downtown Brooklyn in the 1840s, 50s, early 60s. There's so many stories that can be told, especially in New York, where every story is, I think of every story as a land use story. The history of New York from the pre-colonial period to now has reverberations over time and eventually connects into the present day. For most of my tours, it's either people who live in the city who want to learn more about the neighborhoods around them, or they're people from out of town who really know what they're doing and really want to go deep. But the really great thing is connecting the dots from various historical points and various geographical points that we may not necessarily think about. And sort of we're walking past places where history was made every day, and getting to shed a little bit more light on it is a really special experience. The congregation got the money together, $12,500, which is about just under $400,000 today. So talk about, community coming together, community building wealth to make this happen. I think my interest started growing up as a kid in the city. I grew up in Southeast Queens. A lot of trips to the Queens Museum, seeing the panorama. Kind of coalesced in high school. Was a volunteer and then intern docent at the Loui Armstrong House Museum in Corona. Spent a day or two a week in the archives, helping catalog records and books and other papers that come in, and then giving tours. Kind of solidified my interest in history and wanting to study it in undergraduate, eventually graduate school, and luckily enough to make it part of my career. So I'm here in Fort Greene Park in front of the Prison Ship Martyrs Monument, which was erected in 1908 to honor those who were prisoners of war during the American War for Independence, were undergoing squalid conditions, and many died on prison ships in Wallabout Bay, in New York Harbor. The reason I start this Douglas tour here, even though the Revolutionary War has no connection to Douglas, and this was erected after he died, a major advocate for the development of Fort Greene Park, or was originally Washington Park at that point, was Walt Whitman. Whitman was also a journalist. He was an editor of the Brooklyn Eagle and then the Brooklyn Daily Times. He promoted Douglas's first promoted appearance in Brooklyn, which was at the Odeon Theater in Williamsburg, originally at South 5th and Driggs. His first lecture here in New York on self-made men, which was a lecture he would do as a standard throughout his career on the speaking circuit. Talk a little bit about a couple other sites where Douglas spoke. Ida B. Wells Place, and talking about Ida B. Wells' connection to Douglas. January 1st, 1863, final Emancipation Proclamation comes into effect. February 7th, Douglas is really feeling himself and feeling this fervor for abolition. Now it's become an abolitionist war. I do a kind of home neighborhood tour of the lost theaters of Bay Ridge, looking at all the places that used to be movie theaters. One of them still is the Alpine Cinemas, the longest still operating movie theater in the 5 boroughs. I do a tour of Greenwood Cemetery, focused on the history of the cemetery, its relationship to Sunset Park, special focus on LGBTQ individuals who are interred at Greenwood. When it comes to, the cycles of neighborhoods from being artistic communities to undergoing levels of development and gentrification, and what we're seeing now in hyper-gentrification, I try and tell that story. Ultimately, what I hope they get out of it is, number one, a positive experience, that they've learned more, and hopefully the curiosity that I have about the city and about the world around us rubs off a little on them, and they end up looking for those dots to connect in their neighborhoods, in their communities.
This will be a place where we can showcase the talents of new artists, new musicians. And they're going to come from Queens, they're going to come from New York City, they're going to come from New York State, they're going to come from around the country, they're going to come from New Orleans for sure, and they're going to come from all over the world.
With a celebration fit for the King of Jazz in Corona, Queens, the neighborhood where in March 1948, Loui Armstrong surprised the musical legend with his first real home.
As Loui was traveling around the world, staying in hotels, whenever he would come back, he and Lucille would have to stay in a hotel. And Lucille indicated to Loui, this is not going to work out for the future. We have to do something about this. I want to buy a house. And Loui said no, that he preferred living in hotels. So he was on a tour, and Lucille, who had worked prior, had an account, and she took some money from her account, her funds, and she put a down payment down 80 years ago this past March. And when Loui returned, she said, come to your new house. And he said, oh, you're obviously kidding. And she said, this is the address, I'll see you there. And when she opened the door, after he knocked, he saw the house for the first time.
Through the years, Pops and Lucille became well-loved fixtures in the community. Upon Lucille's passing in 1983, Loui having died in 1971, the house and its contents were given to the New York City Department of Cultural Affairs, who in partnership with Queens College was given the task of turning their home into the Loui Armstrong House Museum.
I just give her enormous credit, for wanting to see the house shared, with not only the community but the fans of Loui Armstrong. I think she saw it as a way of maintaining his legacy and keeping it going. And that's what it did. It was turned into an iconic destination.
With the success of the museum, the idea of adding an educational center across the street seemed the next logical step.
The center was always a dream of local community leaders, elected officials. There was always some talk about having some place where there could be a jazz club, where there could be exhibitions, where there could be concerts.
That dream was finally realized in June 2023 with the opening of the Loui Armstrong Center. Dedicated to his and Lucille's values of artistic excellence, education, and community, it includes an archive of over 60,000 photos, recordings, manuscripts, letters, and mementos. There is also a performance space, a multimedia exhibit called Here to Stay, curated by the artistic director for jazz at the Kennedy Center, Jason Moran, as well as a digital archive.
And the wonderful thing about this new Armstrong Center is that not only do we build on the heritage and legacy of Loui Armstrong, but at the same time we create Armstrong Now. I have in my hand the ice cream trumpet, which out of the many trumpets that Loui Armstrong had during his career, this was his favorite. It's such an inspiration because it reminds us that Loui Armstrong didn't just sit behind closed doors. He sat on the stoops with the children of this neighborhood and he played his favorite trumpet. And they walked away saying to themselves, I'm going to make music too. We have opened a community asset, a community facility that shows that Corona is flourishing again. It will be attracting not only tourists, but school children, not only teachers, but parents, not only jazz lovers, but to-be jazz lovers. I think that once people come and have a sense of the over 500 collages, the hundreds of reel-to-reel tapes, you see some of the notes on the desk, to Count Basie and Barbra Streisand and Frank Sinatra and Dizzy Gillespie, the love letter to the neighborhood, the beautiful portrait of Loui Armstrong done by Tony Bennett, the voices of Loui and Lucille, the stories that are here. I think that visitors will walk away just saying two words. Oh, yeah.
I'm Scott Kirby for Urban U.
CUNY TV has an app. Download it and watch us anytime, anywhere, on the go. That's all for our show. For more episode highlights and sneak peeks into our upcoming stories, meet us on our social media platforms. Thank you for watching these stories from the largest university in the nation, the City University of New York.